Hi everybody and welcome. Today I'm going to do a short photo shoot because I'm testing two versions of the Nikon 24-70 f-mount lens and one version of the Z-mount lens. Now I've used this old lens, it's a G series with its ED glass, since 2015, and even then it was an old model because it was released back in 2007. Now in 2015 Nikon released this version, which was the VR version. Now my old girl has been my portrait workhorse for years and years, and it's really showing its age. The rubber's stretched and the body's battered, a little bit like myself. And although the glass is as good as the day I bought it, I probably need to replace it. Now the logical replacement is its VR successor. However, I might have mentioned once or twice that I now have the Z9. So I'm not sure whether to invest in the newer f-mount or go for the new kid on the block, the Z24-70 f2.8, which retails at about 2,299, 200 quid cheaper than its f-mounted cousin. Okay, I'll tell you what, this video has been a long time in the making. In fact, I filmed it twice. You see, I just didn't think the first film was good enough for you guys. So I got hold of these lenses again, and we're going to do another one, and we're going to add it to the previous version. Sorry about the continuity cock-up, but let's just say a glass of wine and a beard trimmer aren't the ideal combination last thing at night. Okay, and at least you get to see some more of my office. That's because I'm using a different lens. Okay, so before we get back to the studio part, let's take a closer look at the stars of the show, which are of course the three lenses. So firstly, we have the Nikon 24-70 f2.8 GED, which will be known for the rest of this video as the G lens. Okay, next we have, of course, it's a Nikon and it's a Z. It's not that one, it's that one. It's the Z 24-70 f2.8 S lens. You see, I do it from start to finish without any cuts. And finally, we've got the Nikon 24-70 f2.8 EAFS ED VR lens. And we're going to call that the VR lens from now on. So we have the G lens, the Z lens and the VR lens. Now, given that we all have a lot less cash in our pockets now than when I started this video 3 Prime Ministers ago, I'm questioning as to whether the upgrade to the VR Z is even necessary. But long before I make any decisions, we need to start looking at a closer look at them, taking a closer look at them. So firstly, let's talk about size. You can see the VR lens is considerably larger than the Z and consequently heavier. In fact, it's 270 grams more than the Z. That's a little more than 11 AA Duracell batteries, or slightly less than the Syrian hamster, apparently. The G lens is midway between them both at 902 grams. Now, the Z lens, as you'd expect, feels a lot more balanced on the old camera. The G lens wasn't too bad, but don't forget that when you fit the FTZ adapter, it adds more weight and length to both of the F lenses. So, if you fit a heavier VR lens to a lighter camera than this Z9, say a Z6 II, it does start to feel a little bit front heavy. Okay, let's look at the rings and the buttons and stuff like that. Firstly, the old G lens. Well, it only has one switch, and that's for manual or auto focusing. Talking of focusing, here's the focus ring obviously, and there is the zoom ring. You can probably see how knackered that is. The VR has the same setup with the addition of the VR switch. Off, normal and active are the choices. Normal should be classed as just on, really, as active is when, say, you're bouncing around in a fast moving rally car or clinging to the back of a motocross rider. I don't know, I've never used it. I've never been on the back of a motocross rider either. Anyway, off is more important when you're using a tripod, but of course you guys know that already. Now the Z lens is a different beast to the previous pair completely. For a start, it has an OLED display that's powered by the camera. It can show you the distance between you and the subject, not sure why, but it does that anyway, and the depth of field. Or with a press of the button next to it, you can change it to the aperture or zoom length. And on top of that, you can choose whether you want to see feet or meters. And you do that by holding this button here for a couple of seconds, turning the control ring here at the back to choose, and then pressing the button again for another 2 seconds, and then you're set. The third ring, as it's known, can be set to control aperture or exposure compensation, whichever you choose from the camera's custom settings menu. That's F2, by the way. You can also choose off, which I tend to do because I think it's far too easy to accidentally knock it or turn it. Then we have a lens function button just here, and using the same menu as before, you get offered a whole host of functions to choose from AF lock to matrix metering to live view info display off. And then of course finally there's the zoom ring and the focus ring, and of course the obligatory, there it is, auto manual focus switch. I thought the easiest way of testing these lenses was under studio lights. So now you've gone and seen them close up and personal, let's go back to the action, where I've actually been joined by my model for the day, Melanie. See you in a bit. We will start off with a simple white background because this is all about the lens's ability to focus, capture detail and texture, and not about what we're doing in the studio. Okay, well, I'm going to start off with the Z lens because that's the one that's on my camera. You ready, Melanie?
Yeah.
Excellent. Now you're not going to be able to see her very well because I've got it darkened, and that's because I want to be able to control the lighting with the flash entirely. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, let's get started. Okay, as I say, I'm starting with the Z lens, and it's just a bog standard white background shot. Can you put your left hand sort of just to the side of your face as if you were just sweeping your hair back? Thank you very much. Now look up to the top right. Try not to get blinded by the flash. Perfect. Okay. And look down to the left. Okay, up and to the right again. Left hand up. Same place as it was before. That's it. And now look down to the left. Look a bit sultry. Or just grin your head off. Head off. That's it. Dreamy, dreamy face. Happy place. Okay. We'll see what we got with those pictures, because you're looking at them now. And that means it's time to change lenses. Okay, we are now back with my old lens. If you remember rightly, it's the G series, it's the ED coated lens. So basically we rinse and repeat. Okay, and left hand up. Okay, I think we've had enough of my waffle. It's time to talk about how these lenses handle. As far as focus is concerned, there's really not an obvious difference between these two lenses. The Z is a little faster, as you'd expect, but it's the way they treat the subject that's so different. The Z lens is sharper and more contrasty, whereas my old G lens is softer, but in a good way. Gentler, more sympathetic if you like. Yeah. And we're going to change the lens again. Now, confession time. What I've shown you so far are the edited images. So here are the pictures from the Z lens unedited. All I've really done is to crop them. The same with the shots from my old G lens. No sharpening, contrast, clarity, etc. Now compare both sets, and the obvious difference is the brightness of the images in the top row. Now they're from the Z lens. I think they're also slightly more vibrant if you compare the colour and the lighting of the hair. My wife described the Z set as sunlit, and I think that's a pretty accurate description, even down to the overexposed highlights on the face. The G lens may be a little dull maybe, but possibly more consistent. And the good old histograms of course support this. Always go back to your histograms. Right, okay, we're back with the F-mount VR lens. Now I've got the VR switched off because I don't need it frankly. And let's see how this one does. Okay, hand up by the side. You heard me directing Melanie the first time, you don't need to hear me repeating myself. I said earlier that the VR lens and the FTZ adapter would be fairly front heavy on a lighter camera than the Z9. Well actually, it's quite a lump with the Z9. If I fit it to a D5 on the other hand, it balances perfectly, just like it was designed to. And that's despite the D5 body being a little heavier than the Z9. Okay, looking at the unedited VR pictures, Melanie's hair colour is much more accurate. And there's a little more life there too. And the images are a touch warmer when the three sets are compared. It's worth reiterating that the images are virtually straight out of the camera, all of these images. The studio lights stayed on for the same for all the three lenses, and the camera setting stayed the same, except I had to stop down slightly for the brighter Z lens, just to counter its tendency to blow out the lighter parts of the face. Now to compare the quality of all three lenses, I guess we need to see them close up. Cue the randomly selected cropped images. We should be focused on the eyes, but the VRs are hidden in the randomly selected set. How typical. So instead we can compare the eyelashes. The Z lens isn't quite as sharp as its rivals, but that could be me, so we need another set. Now this time, the Z is brightest and sharpest by far, and the VR softest. Definitely me then. But we're really pixel peeping here, so I'm not sure that any of the lenses exactly disappoint me. Next set. Wow, it's hard to tell which is the sharpest with this set. I'm looking at the eyeliner and the eyelashes and they're all pretty good. But the most consistent has been the old G lens. Yes, the oldest one. However, I was so confused that I brought in my old mate Jamie to look at all the full-sized images. And we came to the conclusion that generally the Z was the sharpest, but we really didn't like the blown out highlights that it was producing. In fact, a closer inspection found that it even caused some of the hair detail to be lost. The G lens created an overall flatter image, whereas the VR tended to be softer, but overall the images were warmer and more pleasing. Now you may say that I'm being unfair to the Z lens. The Z mount itself is larger in diameter and therefore it must alter the light, mustn't it, reaching the centre compared to an F mount, an FTZ adapter. Certainly it changes the angle of incidence, but science aside, there's something a little sterile about the high key images from the Z lens so far. So, okay, let's shake it up a little bit, because I'm now going to do a darker background and see how the lenses deal with a much more dark, sultry type photograph. Okay, we're back after a bit of a change around here, and quite a heavy rainstorm, which wasn't helpful for the equipment, but we're back and we're now going to do a slightly different type of photo shoot. Okay, I'm going to have to get a bit closer. Now, I don't think you need to watch me working again, do you? So here are the photos from each lens. Once again, I don't think you could be disappointed with the offerings from any of these three lenses. The Z, as expected, is the brightest, but no burnt out areas and nothing we can't draw back with the highlight slider. The G lens is a little darker, but perfectly fine. And the VR, well, it's pretty perfect really, isn't it? We'll take a closer look at the finer details when we crop into these images shortly. I could easily repeat pretty much what I said just now. All three lenses are performing well with colour and tone. The Z lens has given Melanie's eye such depth here. Absolutely stunning detail. The VR has, once again, the most evenly captured light. Isn't it amazing how these lenses vary so? There's a couple of places where we might have lost some detail from the Z, but the colour of the rose has been handled well by all three of them. Finally, the VR may be a bit of a lumpy beast, but look at the way it deals with the hair. Impressive. But for me, has it been left behind by the mirrorless revolution? I'll explain what I mean later. Here I've cropped into the first set. Even though the VR lens has the eye covered by the hair, it's easy to see that the Z lens is by far the sharpest and has captured the most detail. The Z lens is by no means disgraced though, and it's easily sharp enough. This is from the second set, and again the VR looks the softest. Looking at the eyelashes, I'd say the Z is fractionally cleaner than the G, but it's close, you know. By the way, I've put a link to all these images below. Okay, of course you've all got your own views on which lens is best, especially after we did that bit of pixel peeping. And now you're thinking that the quality of these three lenses is not that close. So I'll tell you what, here's a little test. Which lens did I use to take this image? Come on. This is an easy one, so no points awarded. It was obviously the G. What about this one? What do you reckon? A little harder this time? Yes, the VR. But what about this one? Did you guess wrong? It's the VR once again. And finally, it can only be one really. Yes, of course, the Z lens. The odds were kind of in its favour, weren't they? When I'd finished in the studio, I nipped outside to take a few landscapes. Nothing exciting, but I wanted to see how the different lenses dealt with natural light. I've taken a close look at these photos, and by far the Z lens is sharper in every case. The lens captures much more detail than the other two. And while I'm on the subject of the Z lens, I've heard it described as plasticky. But to be honest, it seems to have the same combination of polycarbonate to alloy as the other two. In any case, it's a stunning match to any of the Z camera range. And bearing in mind that it packs 17 elements in its construction, it's light, sharp and extremely pointable. When I was about halfway through producing this video, it was brought to my attention that Ricky has done something similar. Now, I make it a rule that I don't watch or read anybody else's review before publishing my own, so I haven't seen his yet. But do you know, I bet it's as good and as informative as always. He is very, very good. I've done my usual thing, bumbled around, musing about two other lenses compared to my own, and then invited you along for the ride, so I hope you've enjoyed it. Oh, now you want my conclusion. Okay, here goes. Let's start with the newest and oldest lenses, the Z and the G lens. Of course, there's a massive technological advance between them. 12 years is a very, very long time in the camera world. The G lens appeared in the same year as this D3. And as much as I rate this camera, it's still old technology. I mean, we hadn't even heard of a DSLR with video capability back then. Now, the VR lens is a great improvement on the G, and it has far less barrel distortion, so that's great for group shots. But given that I don't do a lot of landscapes or street shots, am I that bothered? You see, this video is about my choice and my journey. You may have different views and you may have different styles. I tend to use the 24-70 as an adaptable portrait lens, so I'm afraid that I'm not that concerned about how sharp the corners are, because they're usually out of focus or cropped out anyway. Of course, the VR also has VR, which could be useful when I'm shooting in low light. I can't get past the fact that it's only £200 less than the Z lens, which although doesn't have VR, it doesn't need VR, thanks to the mirrorless in-camera image stabilisation. And more importantly, I usually leave VR switched off most of the time anyway. Yes, I know that certain Z cameras can combine their image stabilization with VR to control all 5 directions, pitch, roll, yaw, X and Y, apparently giving you back 6 stops. But you won't freeze a galloping dog with a shutter speed of a 60th of a second, as somebody was trying to convince me the other day. So I'm not really that interested, because VR and camera stabilization are so misunderstood. Don't even get me started on the subject. So we are back to the other two, the G lens and the Z lens. Now it looks like I'm going to be sticking with the Z9, partially as it's stunning and partially because it looks like the D6 will be the last pro DSLR. And I'm not sure about buying another F mount. Is that logical, to be quite honest, on that theory? Therefore my conclusion is the Z 24-70 f2.8 will have to be my next purchase at some point down the line. It's stunningly sharp throughout both the f-stop and zoom range, and I'm really impressed with it. However, for the time being, I will continue my old G lens, as I preferred its subtler high-key portrait quality. Not everyone wants a studio portrait that shows every blemish and blocked pore, and frankly I don't want to spend extra time editing them out either. But for daily use and dog portraiture, the 24-70 Z lens will be my go-to lens in the future. Thank you so much for joining me, and if you like this video, don't forget to like it, and if you really like it, then please subscribe. And hi to all my subscribers, thank you so much for sticking with me. If you don't agree with this video, I'm very sorry about that, but don't forget this was my journey. You may have your own journey and you may choose a different lens. That doesn't make me wrong and it doesn't make you wrong. So I hope you enjoy whatever lens you choose. See you soon. Take care. Bye.